Alert, we have some breaking news. This just in. Breaking philosophical news, guys. Unprofessional news. Okay, so here we are. It's early in the morning, and we got things that we got to do, and we got places that we got to go, and so forth and so on. Monday, up and at 'em. So we got exciting things coming up for Consciousness Live. So I thought I would just take a second before getting into any other interesting things and plug what's coming up the next few Mondays. So the first few of those few Mondays is this particular Monday, March 4th. I'll be speaking with Gualtiero Piccinini on issues related to computation and consciousness. This is going to be a rough day if it's going to keep up like this. Okay. Next Monday, the 11th, I don't have anybody scheduled for Consciousness Live, but I'm going to be giving a guest lecture in Joe Ledoux's class. His teaches a class at NYU on the emotional brain. I've been giving a guest lecture in this class for many years since we've been writing and working together. And this one's significant because Joe is retiring from teaching. He's already shut down his lab, and now I think this is the last class that he's going to teach. So I've given a version of this talk before and recorded it and put it on my YouTube channel. You can still find it, it's there. But that version was when Joe first invited me. I thought this was a graduate class, so I went and prepared a talk for like graduate students. And then afterwards, he told me, these are undergraduates. I was like, oh, I didn't realize. So I guess I didn't know that it was for undergraduates. So I have a different lecture that I give in there now. And maybe I was thinking it might be fun to like live stream it or record it in some way, but I don't know. Maybe I'll just put the slides up like I normally do. So next Monday, maybe I'm not sure. I doubt there'll be anything live on the channel. Maybe I'll do some office hours. Maybe, yeah, okay. Maybe I'll do office hours before I head over to Ledoux's class. Uh, the following Monday, the 18th of March, um, I am hoping to have Matthias Michel back on Consciousness Live. I haven't triple confirmed it, but we have it penciled in for that date because of other things that are up in the air. So I'm still hoping that it's going to work out. That gives you time to go and watch the previous discussion I had with Matthias when he was still a graduate student and blowing us all away with his interesting work and ideas. So now we're going to come back and see where he is now. He's been up to some cool stuff. So that's Monday, March 18th. And then, I already took down my breaking news. But Monday, March 25th, the return of the T jump. Yes, that's right. Tom Jump and I will be discussing your favorite topic of all time, the rule following argument. So, last time we had a discussion about this, it was quite a long discussion and maybe not very productive. So I feel like that I didn't do a good job trying to present the case, maybe, and I don't want anyway. So we will be discussing this again, and I'm very excited to have a more toned down actual conversation, one where we're not trying to go at it in any sort of way. So that's the rest of March that's coming up. Some interesting things. And as always, I have, other things in the air that I can't exactly um, speak of at the moment. But nonetheless, we will see what we can. So, what are we going to do today? Well, I don't know. I got a lot to do. So, we don't have a lot of time. But I couldn't help but notice as I was touring the old YouTube, this popped up right off the bat as soon as I sat down. My morning cup of coffee. And what do I see? Bernardo Kastrup versus Christof Koch. So, holy moly, this is going to be interesting. I don't know who this Fideas podcast is. I think I watched something from this podcast before with maybe Bernardo. So maybe he has a special in with Bernardo. Now, Christoph, I've had on Consciousness Live, and we had an interesting discussion. And Bernardo, I've had on several times. We had an interesting discussion. I recently asked him back on. He said he's too busy. So that's great. But maybe in the future, he won't be too busy because I always find it interesting. Uh, Now, of course, I asked him back on to actually have a debate about physicalism as opposed to just an interview, which is what he agreed to last time. So, okay, we'll see. But it's interesting because, as far as I can tell, Bernardo's really warmed up to IIT, the Integrated Information Theory of Consciousness. And Christoph also is well known for having warmed up to IIT. Um, So it would be interesting to see if they're going to give different interpretations of IIT or if, um, let's see, this part looks like the intro. We don't want that. Okay, so I'm just going to jump right into this and see what's what. I watched a little preview snippet of it and it looks good. So let's go ahead and get into it.
So I'm curious to see where you think Christoph is the intersection between your work, guys, and how did you meet and the whole concept?
This is it. This is where we find
Hey,
out.
quick question. Student body math proficiency.
What?
What do we say? It's good, fair.
Get out of here.
I reached out to Bernardo after an extraordinary experience I had on a beach at midnight in Bahia, Brazil. And I felt I had an ontological.
Oh, Christoph, you've always worn the clothes. Don't tell me you tripped out and called Bernardo. Okay.
In Bahia, Brazil. And I felt I had an ontological shock, my worldview, that I'm a quite successful scientist, I'm a brain scientist and a physicist, and the worldview I had defended, or I'm still defending for many, many decades, sort of, there was a crack in it. And I wanted to find out more about idealism, which is the philosophy that Bernardo espouses, which is it's very rare these days, very uncommon for people to be idealists. And maybe you can tell us a little bit more about idealism, because most people today, particularly people in the tech industry and scientists that I hang out with, they tend to believe what's called machine functionalism or computational functionalism, which is really the belief that you can simulate anything. And once you have an accurate enough simulation of something, like the simulation in a VR, in a video game, then you can approximate the thing that you're simulating better and better. And then there's ultimately no more difference between the computer simulation and the reality. But the question is, does this also hold for consciousness? When I have a feeling of being in love or being angry. And most people in the tech industry believe, yes, a computer can, of course, be conscious. And I beg to differ for some principal reasons. And idealism is also a metaphysical.
Yeah, interesting, because when I talked to Christoph, I tried to press him on this idea that IIT sort of suggests that consciousness could be in a computer if a computer simulates something with integrated information. He said, no, the hardware has to be integrated, not just the thing it simulates. So I didn't quite understand that response, to be honest. But it's also interesting because when I had Bernardo on, he also is very keen to deny that computers can be conscious. And those who know me know that I like biological naturalism, or something, I guess you could call it, the idea that the mind is the brain. Type identity theory is my, I wouldn't say what I think is true, but what I would bet the most money on and hope would come out. That doesn't mean it's going to come out that way. It means that would be nice. But so these guys have different views than me, but I guess we're all sort of united in a way by thinking about ways in which consciousness might not be functional. I've been thinking about this a lot lately too, because of reading Gualtiero's work, who I'm going to talk to later today. He has something interesting to say about this.
I believe that also espouses a very different view on what consciousness is, what the mental is.
So you used to be a materialist, or you are still a materialist?
Well, I mean, a materialist, it's called materialist sort of is an old-fashioned term that comes from the 19th century, because in the meantime, we have things like dark matter, we have things like multiverses, we have dark energy, that really is very difficult to see materialism. So today it's called physicalism, the belief that fundamentally nature is sort of made out of physical things, out of quantity, like mass and charge and gravitational attraction and things like that. But I've always held the belief that consciousness, my experience is independent or is related to, but it's another domain. Right? There are two domains. There's the physical and there's the mental. And how do the challenge always has been, how do they relate? And most.
So he sounds like he's a property dualist. Sounds like he thinks that there's a brain and then it has these consciousness properties, but that they are distinct.
People today think, well, the mental is just an outgrowth of physical. It's when certain systems become very complex, then they have an experience. But it's really, there's nothing different about it. Some philosophers, in fact, say when you really talk about the feeling of love or hate or anger or seeing red or seeing this crystal, it's all an illusion. It doesn't really exist.
He has to pick up that thing. Christof, do you see what you're wearing, bro? You could have just said this vest. Power classing shirt, vest, glasses, combo that I'm rocking. See that? You don't need to pick up the crystal.
I beg to differ. But the question is, what is primary? Is it, so you can see that philosophy revolves around two poles. Throughout history, at least in the West, there's the mental and the physical. And some people, like most people in our country, the US, probably are some sort of dualist. They believe there's physical stuff, but then there's also mental stuff. This comes to us from philosopher René Descartes, right? Who was living here, very close by in Holland, although he was a Frenchman, René Descartes. But then how do the two interact? And so over the last 150 years, we've sort of totally pivoted and say ultimately everything is physical. Everything is physical, subject to natural laws. That served us very well. We can build nuclear reactors, nuclear bombs, we can build mRNA vaccines. But we have great difficulty explaining consciousness. That's why some people don't want to deal with it and say, oh, it's all a big illusion. On the other hand, there's this ancient belief that maybe everything is fundamentally mental. Everything ultimately is just sort of stuff.
I mean, physicalism is an ancient belief too. I mean, or materialism, if you really want to make that distinction. I'm open to it, by the way. But these are both ancient beliefs. So I don't like it when people, I mean, I guess I could see why they want to contrast it with the thing we currently believe, but the thing we currently believe has ancient roots as well, with a distinct lineage up to where we are now. So anyway, yes, it is an ancient view.
Similar to stuff consciousness is made out of. And then there are other forms called panpsychism, which just means that everything is ensouled, that everything at its fundamental nature already feels like something, has some mental aspect. Even subatomic particles would feel like something, but that's also very difficult to explain. So this is what philosophers have always dealt with. But now scientists are encroaching onto that because we study consciousness, we study where it arises in the brain and what happens if you have a disorder of consciousness. So we want to know, and then of course we are confronted with these machines like ChatGPT that talk like they're conscious, right? It's remarkable, it's uncanny. And so we're now faced with our question of our age, are they conscious and how would we know? So right now, I just have my ontological system has a crack, but I'm still, card-carrying professional neuroscientist that believes that the brain and the mind are very closely related. That consciousness needs this brain, needs this substrate. That if my brain is dead, there's no more consciousness.
Yeah, it makes it sound like he's. So the question was, are you a materialist? Christof's answer, long-winded though it may be, seems to be arriving at the conclusion, no, maybe. So it's the brain is a necessary condition on his view. So he's not an idealist. If the brain is required, and the brain is a physical object, although you say the brain as a mental object in a certain way is required for consciousness like ours. I don't know. Anyway, so it sounds like his answer is it sounds like he took some psychedelics, had an experience on a beach, became very convinced that consciousness doesn't fit in with the physical world, that's primary or something, and doesn't know how to reconcile that with his idea that it's the physical stuff that's primary and that consciousness is related to it in some way. That's sort of what I'm getting from what he's saying here. Now, of course, I take all these views seriously. I enjoy all this stuff, but these kind of questions are not, you might think, scientific questions in the ordinary sense. They're metaphysical questions. So I wouldn't say that science is encroaching on these metaphysical questions. Well, okay, I see how they're going to go through this then. IIT is going to be the way that they're going to do this, right? Interesting. Okay. All right. Let's see how it goes.
For me, at least.
So you are a man search for meaning about consciousness.
And
that's why you are here to discuss all these things with Bernardo, right?
That's correct. Yes, I spent the last 2 days here with Bernardo talking about these things.
How was it, Bernardo, talking about all these things the last 2 days? What did you talk? Did you had any breakthrough? What was the conversation?
Just as Christof is sort of approaching other metaphysical possibilities over the past months, couple of years.
So, by the way, just before Bernardo gets going, some people, some like card-carrying functionalists or stuff, are probably not going to like that a neuroscientist is talking about idealism. They may think that's somehow bad. But metaphysics, so my view is that these metaphysical views go beyond the science, and you could have perfectly consistent interpretations of the science that are idealistic or physicalistic, transcendental idealism or not. So those are, strictly speaking, extra claims. But so I applaud Christof by looking into idealism and thinking about that stuff. I'm not someone who's going to say, oh no, the scientist has gone off the rails. I'm someone who's going to say his taste in vests needs examining.
I have been approaching the view he has been supporting for a while, him and Giulio Tononi, which is a particular theory of consciousness called integrated information theory, which I initially thought was just a physicalist theory. And from 2017, I started understanding that it was not so. It's a theory that honors the nature of experience. It's based on tenets or axioms that are derived from introspection, the recognition of what experience is.
So you want to explain a bit more simple about this theory for me and the audience to understand.
Yeah, so as Christof mentioned, what is popular today is a form of functionalism. What it says is that consciousness is the outcome of something the brain does. Like software does something and then out comes consciousness. And if something else would be a...
I wouldn't say it's outcome. I'd say these guys think that's what it is. An identity theory is consciousness is a certain program running. It's not like the program runs and then it produces consciousness. That's the incorrect way to think about functionalism. So look, I'm no friend. I don't like functionalism just as much as this guy. You kind of get beat down into it so that you realize there aren't many options except functionalism. Or your intuition's already naturally there. Like some people really have this intuition. But okay, so
simulation of what the brain does, then out comes consciousness as well. And both of us disagree with the functionalism. We think we have to honor the causal powers of the substrate. So in the case of the brain...
So it's a computation. So these theories would say consciousness is ultimately a clever hack. If you write the right code and implement it on the right machine, the machine will be conscious.
Yeah, and we both disagree with that. We think it is frankly nonsensical.
Because it's based
what is it? Rhetoric is so fun.
That we think it is frankly nonsensical.
because it's based on the material world, kind of.
No, see, if you're a functionalist, Christof uses a much more polite example where we use my favorite metaphor.
Oh God, here we go. The desk is going to get peed on. Okay, so this is a common thing that Bernardo says, but it's just not very useful in this discussion. It doesn't make the point that he thinks that it makes, unfortunately. But here we go.
If you're a functionalist, not only about consciousness, but about everything related to the body, what the body does, you would say that if you have an accurate enough simulation of kidney function on your computer, and you make it more and more accurate until it's accurate down to the molecular level, then eventually your computer will pee on your desk, which is absurd. Because
So it's just, 2024. We're still saying simulated kidneys don't pee on your desk. I'm all for rhetoric, guys. Everyone engages in it, but I like arguments more than rhetoric. And this is not a good argument. There is nobody. There are 0 persons, none, who make the claim that a simulated kidney should pee on your desk, or the computer would pee on your desk. That is not the claim. In fact, the people who talk about this stuff are very, very clear that from our point of view, outside of the simulated kidney, looking at the computer, that kidneys and urination refer to certain biological processes which are being simulated by the computer, and therefore they're not engaging in that. What Bernardo fails to appreciate, or willfully ignores, I'm not really sure which one, is that the argument depends on taking the point of view of the simulation. So if, from our point of view, our words mean a certain thing, but let's suppose that this is a simulated world, then in that case, kidneys and urination and so forth have always referred to these simulated objects. Now, you may find that absurd or nonsense to sort of imagine that this is a simulated world. I don't think that's the correct way to think about things here. So, nonetheless, no one claims that the simulated kidney results in what we call urination. It results in the simulated process, simulated urination. So the simulated kidney will simulate peeing, and there will be simulated urination. And if you were in the simulation, then the following claims would be made about that. So the difference between kidneys and consciousness, the claim is that some of these things, a simulation of it is a simulation of it, is the thing itself. Sorry, a simulation of it is the thing itself. So that's not the case with kidneys. But it is the case with a computer. If you simulate a computer, then you have a computer. Anyway, so this is just a tired old way of making a rhetorical point that's quick and easy, but really doesn't do justice to the interesting questions, especially as related to consciousness, but just generally related about simulation. So you can do better, Bernardo. I know you can.
the simulation of something is not the thing simulated. A simulation of kidney function is not a kidney, or your example, a simulation of a black hole is not a black hole. So you can run a simulation on your computer of a black hole, it's not going to suck you in because
It will suck anything that's simulated in its vicinity in. That's the point. So black holes and kidneys, our words refer to a certain thing. Those things are out here with us. So they're not in the computer being simulated. We understand that. But the things in the simulation have a different relationship to that simulated black hole. Yeah, bummer.
simulation doesn't have the causal powers of a black hole. A simulation of kidney function doesn't have the causal powers of kidneys. By the same token, a simulation of the brain doesn't have the causal powers of the structure of the brain. So it will not output consciousness.
But it'll behave
as if
it's conscious. So ChatGPT can talk like it's conscious and will do this better and better, but it doesn't mean it is conscious. So in the limit, computers can do anything we can do, maybe even better and faster, but they will never be what we are, which is conscious. That's a big.
Yeah, but there's no argument here. So they're asserting this based on this really questionable analogy that the simulated thing is not the thing itself, except when it is. Like when you simulate a computer, then the thing is a computer. When you simulate a chess game, that is a chess game. So there are certain things which it does make sense to talk this way about. And the question is whether consciousness is one of those or one of the other things. So this is just terrible.
Difference between doing and being.
so. Instead of this naive functionalism, what he does, and increasingly I buy into, is we first analyze what consciousness is. What is the structure of experience? What are the key properties of experience? What it feels like to experience. So we map that structure, and then we try to find in the world a structure that matches with that. So we can build a map between the two. Where do we find it? Well, we find it in the brain. The structure of brain function, sort of, if you look with the right eyes, with the right theoretical arsenal, you will find that it mirrors a lot about experience. So if we can construct this map between brain function and experience, we will have an account, at least, of the contents of consciousness. Where we still differ is that Christof takes the substrate, the brain, as a key. Without it, no consciousness. I tend to think that the brain is what a certain mode, a certain state of consciousness looks like. And you could have a different form of consciousness that does not correlate with the brain.
So you think ChatGPT can have a consciousness?
No,
But
no. But I think if your brain is inactive, there can be a form of consciousness at large that is.
I mean, when I hear these guys talk, it makes me want to be a functionalist. Like I want, there's no reason that they say that the sort of thing that he just said. So why could not an experience, on Bernardo's view, look like a computer processing information? It's just prejudiced. There's no argument. It's okay. Yeah.
Inactivated. Or inactive. It's
Wait,
That
hold on.
brain is inactive.
What?
There,
Hold
no,
on.
but the brain.
so you think ChatGPT can have a consciousness?
No.
But
No. But I think if your brain is inactive, there can be a form of consciousness at large.
If your brain is inactive, well, the IIT asserts that if you have the causal structure there, but it's not activated, you still have consciousness. So if your brain, so you could still have, according to IIT, as I understand it, consciousness in an inactive brain. I think what he means is you could have it without a brain at all, but maybe that's too subtle of a distinction.
Is
inactivated. Or inactive. It's a big difference between.
Oh, inactivated okay, I see. So this is their distinction between a brain that's broken in some way, or one that's like functionable, but just not activated, not on. I think that's what Christof's going for.
Inactive and inactivated.
So that
in the one case, the brain has lost its causal power because of an external agent like an anesthesia. Then you admit that brain can lose consciousness, as it does during deep anesthesia, during surgery.
I admit that if you're dead and your brain is completely inactivated and it has no causal powers, then that is not correlated with individual consciousness. In other words, consciousness that feels it is separate from the world. But I do think that the brain is just what a particular dissociative state of mind looks like. So if the brain is not there, there is still mind, but it's mind at large, not mind.
I mean, that is interesting. So I never thought about this before, but what exactly, if the person is deceased and you're looking at their brain, then that still is an experience on his view, the same as it was before. It's interesting.
The brain is just what a particular dissociative state of mind looks like. So
it's still a dissociative state of mind, even when the brain is. So I think that's what he's trying to say is, let me hold on.
Brain is not there, there is still mind, but it's mind at large, not mind concentrated in a particular point in space and time.
Which you really believe during, let's say you get a bypass, coronary bypass, right? Deep surgical level anesthesia, right? And so you poke the patient, no response whatsoever, and you cut open the chest cavity. You're saying that under this condition, the patient is still conscious?
Yes, but not feeling the surgery. Because, an anesthetic will have even another dissociative, and your heart rate and blood pressure are monitored. There is no sign that you are experiencing distress or pain, which doesn't mean that you are not experiencing something.
But how would I, if you do good surgery, anesthesia properly, there's no memory of it.
Correct, because there is a drug that does precisely that. It avoids memory formation.
People don't move, so how do I know the brain activity in deep surgery also goes down? They shift into delta waves, which is more closely associated with sleep. Right? You don't get the normal brain activity that you get if you're awake or if you're in a REM sleep, when you tend to dream. But you see, despite all of that, there is still consciousness there.
Yeah.
Okay,
and your question is, how do you know that, right?
Yes, how do I know that? I mean, how do I know my liver isn't conscious but chooses not to tell me because it can't talk?
So the way I would reply that is, okay, let's go to integrated information theory. Suppose the internet acquires a structure that has hi-fi. And the integrated information theory would say it is conscious now because it has enough integrated information. How do you know?
Yeah, so once I have a theory, I can then infer, just like once I have the theory of general relativity, I can infer there must be objects like black holes, right? And then people looked for them and found them. So, yes,
right, so Bernardo's saying the same thing. I see where he's
and once we have a theory like IIT that's well accepted, and I look in the liver and I find some structure that corresponds to what IIT, what integrated information theory, IIT is just a short form of it, says is conscious, then I have to assume it feels a little bit like to be a liver. Now, it doesn't mean that the liver is anxious, that the liver knows about the weekend,
nor am I
is
saying
upset
that.
or in love, but it may feel like something to be a liver. And when the liver is truly dead, it doesn't feel like anything. However, IIT would also predict that under anesthesia, my consciousness, let's say my egoic consciousness, the one that sort of accesses Broca's area and talks, is gone.
I think he's misunderstanding Bernardo, or he's thinking about IIT, but Bernardo's saying, yeah, I have a theory of idealism, and now I can apply it to the brain under anesthesia.
IIT has no trouble with the idea that consciousness can wax and can wane, and maybe during certain parts of deep sleep it's gone, and during anesthesia it's gone.
I agree with that. So to tackle this one by one, I don't claim that there is something it is like to be a liver as opposed to a kidney. The idea is that making an inference from theory, just like you said, it's okay. So let me do that. Let me make an inference from theory. In this case, a philosophical theory. Under analytic idealism, what is matter? Matter is what mental states look like when observed from across a dissociative boundary. In other words, when observed from the outside. Just like your brain is what your thoughts look like when observed from the outside. When observed from within, your thoughts are what your thoughts feel like to you. But from the outside, they look like a brain. If I do that under idealism for the matter in the brain is formed of the same atoms and force fields as the rest of the universe. So I have to extrapolate that. Otherwise, I have an arbitrary discontinuity.
Yeah, but then so you do get the straightforward implication that there is something that's like to be a liver as opposed to a kidney or whatever it is, because they're both mental states that there's something that it's like for the grand, bigger agent. So I don't see how you avoid that implication on Bernardo.
So the inference is matter, all matter, not only the matter in the nervous system, is what mental states look like. Therefore, the liver too is what mental states look like, but not necessarily, there isn't necessarily a correspondence between the liver and one complex. The liver could be an aggregation of ontological dust.
Yeah, but then effectively it doesn't feel much like anything at all.
Jim was something that I've never encountered before.
He seemed like a really nice teacher.
I'm just trying to figure
Yeah, but each component of the liver, there would be for each of them at the level of ontological dust, something it feels like to be them.
Yeah, but that's like saying deep space has heat because we know from the background radiation that it's not absolute zero. It's at
correct.
2.4 degrees Kelvin. For us, it's totally meaningless because for us, for a human, space is utterly unimaginable cold. And to say, well, there's some heat there doesn't really help me.
Yeah, I see where you're going. I don't know, we are getting pretty deep now. Is it okay?
Yes, it's very okay.
For analytic idealism, because it's a reductionist philosophy, and you know that I have this bias towards reductionism, it may be wrong, but it is what it is. That's how I'm put together. For us to make the ultimate reduction and explain everything in terms of one thing, that one thing is one subject, like Schopenhauer's that which looks out into the world through your eyes and my eyes. Schopenhauer put it that way. So that subject...
Will.
Yeah, the will.
The will.
The will, but not only the instinctive will.
So we should say for our audience, Schopenhauer is a German philosopher, Arthur Schopenhauer of the 19th century, who espoused probably the best known, how would you say, the best articulated idealistic worldview.
By far, yeah. And so that would be the single ontological primitive of idealism, this universal subject, which can be visualized as a field. And particular mental states, particular experiences are just excitations of the subject. So from that perspective, even if there is not one complex that is mind at large, but a gazillion, a myriad of complexes, underlying each complex, it would still be the same subject, the same eyes of nature that look out from every creature and from everything that is a complex.
But then how do you
So there is something that is like to be a kidney versus a liver. It's just that they're mental states of the larger subject.
explain? So on this planet, there are 8 billion human-sized complexes, each of which has their own consciousness, assuming everyone is awake and conscious, right? But as you well know, I don't know what you are experiencing. And I could be married to you, and we could be the most intimate partners, for 30 years. You could be interpenetrated. Your body can interpenetrate your partner. You can look into his or her eyes, and you never really know what they're experiencing because all you see is their behavior. So how do you, if we all one mind,
how can it be?
how can it be that I don't
All right, we know Bernardo's answer to this, so
experience your mind or your mind?
You're being kind to me because you know what the answer is, and you're trying to give me an opportunity to say it. So I'll take the opportunity. In terms of dissociation, which we don't have a conceptual account for, but IIT, Integrated Information Theory, is by far the most promising way for us to get a clear, unambiguous, explicit conceptual account of dissociation.
So what?
it's not 100% clear to me that this is going to work without modification, especially if the exclusion postulate of IIT, or the one that says that it's the max phi. So if you have a subject, so I sort of see where Bernardo's going. You have a subject, they have one unified, integrated information, whatever, and then that might bifurcate so that you get two different sort of centers of integrated information. That might be a disassociation. But doesn't the exclusion postulate suggest that since the brain is a connected system, the one with the highest phi is going to be the one that is conscious. The other one is not.
What do you mean by dissociation?
It's when one mind seems to be many, which clinically happens to people. And we have known this since the 19th century, but there has always been that doubt. Are people lying when they say that there are multiple people, like multiple personality disorder, which today is called the dissociative identity disorder, and in which people have multiple seeming personalities with different ages, sometimes different genders, different memories, different personality traits. There was doubt about whether this was really true, or whether people were faking it until the turn of the century. But with neuroimaging, it's now pretty established that it exists. And however,
and some of these patients can have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 so-called alters, alternate personality. They might talk with different voices, with different pitch. They have different. One may have an immune reaction that the other one doesn't have. I mean, it's very strange.
Can I say something?
Sure.
Wow.
and what is even strange?
So you're saying you and I are different
alters of one universal mind.
And Phidias as well.
Is another. In ontological dust is gazillions of others.
How do you say his name? Phidias? Oh, okay.
That's the idea.
At the cost, okay, so you think there's just one mind. So remember early on we mentioned sort of philosophy revolves around the two poles of physicalism and the mental. So materialism, physicalism says there's only this stuff. And you're saying, au contraire, there's only this stuff.
Yeah.
So it's a monism.
Yeah.
Right? And everything I think is real like this, and I can hurt myself. So how can I hurt myself here? If I drop this on your toe, particularly with this point, it's going to be painful.
You are a very good podcaster, by the way.
So how can that be?
Yeah. He's giving me another chance.
Okay, so they're going to be going for a while here. Okay, this is quite long. I'm kind of running out of time, at least for my morning adventure. So I'm going to have to pause this here and come back. I don't know. So mixed feelings, stomach rumbling, kids stirring. Okay, well, I'm thinking, but I got to go.